I'm Tony Ruiz, contributing editor at Gold Derby, here with Richard Thomas, who is revisiting the television classic, The Waltons, this time in the role of narrating the show. And Richard, I feel like this is a full circle moment almost, because if I remember correctly, there was talk initially that you were originally going to do the narration in the original series, or at least in the original film, in The Homecoming.
Well, I think it is full circle. I'm not sure it's correct that there was ever any idea that I was going to do the narration in the original. I had the idea that maybe I was going to do the narration in the original. That was my idea. Because when I read the first scripts, I thought, oh, this is beautiful, and this narration is really lovely, and it's really great. And they said, well, I'm sorry, Richard, I know you do a great job, I'm sure, but Earl Hamner is going to do it. And I said, Earl, what do you mean he's not playing? Well, he's not, and he's older, and he has a voice. But the point is, of course, that Earl Hamner's voice was completely inimitable and absolutely perfect and wonderful. And those narrations that bookended the show in Earl's incredibly beautiful voice from Virginia just gave the entire tone, set the entire tone for the show. So it couldn't have been better. However, 50 years later, I get to do the narrations, and I'm very, very excited about that.
Well, in doing the narration, do you hear, does Earl's voice come into your mind at all?
Earl's voice is always in my mind. Earl's voice, every time I think of the show, not just narration, but every time I have memories of doing it and of the way the show was, what the show was, Earl's voice as narrator, but also his presence as the creator, as executive producer, as the head of the writers, all of that comes to mind all the time. He was an enormously important person for all of us, and he was such a beautiful creator for that show. So he's everywhere in my feelings about the Waltons, which are always fond and happy.
What is it, do you think, about this particular time that makes the return of the Waltons so kind of necessary and important?
Well, I think the Waltons is an American story. It's very located in its time and place, and yet one extrapolates a lot of universal wisdom and feeling from that. So it's both very specific and very general at the same time. And I think one of the most, of course, everybody was like, when the Waltons first came on the air, and there was so much division in the country, and the country was going through so much because of Watergate and Vietnam and everything that had been happening in the 60s and that was happening in the early 70s, a show that came onto the air with a feeling of family unity and a sense that even with all the disagreements that happened within a particular community, whether it's a family community or the community of a town or a place, that those things, that connection was more important than separation, and that one would have a sense of reassurance about our interconnectedness and our caring for one another. And of course, that's why family was the deal, right? Now, 50 years later, it's still true, right? We're in a disastrously fragmented and conflicted place in our country. And a show like The Waltons really talks about feelings and relationships and a way of living that rises above those differences. It's about reconciliation, it's about unity, and not about unity like, well, we're going to hang together because everyone else sucks. It's a feeling of it's about community, not just about family. And so I think that's a very important part of it. And I think it's still relevant. I'm right now on tour with To Kill a Mockingbird. That's a story that takes place in 1934 Alabama. It could not be more relevant than it is today. So these great American stories always have something to tell us.
Did in the narration for this new film and watching it, did it bring back memories of the original Homecoming with Patricia Neal?
Whenever I do the narrations, I'm always reminded of how it was. And even though I'm narrating a film populated by different actors playing these parts, and I see their faces and I've seen their performances and I know them personally, and I'm very, superimposed upon that in my own mind, of course, especially because it's an aging mind, superimposed upon that are all those wonderful faces of the people that I love from the original show. And Pat Neal was, not only a fantastic actress, but a wonderful colleague and great to be with, and became a good friend. So, Pat is there, but of course, Michael is always there. Michael Lerner, who's one of my dearest friends and who was just a wonderful actress. And, she's my mom. We're still a family, all of us, in lots and lots of ways.
Yeah, I would imagine that for a young actor, Logan Troyer's stepping into this role that is,
Right.
So iconic. Did you have any kind of conversations with him about the role, or did you just want to kind of step back and just let him take it and run with it?
Well, he's a really good actor, so he doesn't need my help or anyone else's. But I certainly did talk with him, and I basically just told him, look, if you have any questions for me, if there's anything you want to know, ask. But here's the baton, enjoy it, make it yours, and have a great time. You can't. It's the nature of what we do, that if anything that has the kind of success that the Waltons had, or a play that is really successful, or a film, it's going to get, at some point, chances are it's going to get remade. It's going to get remade with a new perspective. It's going to get remade with new people. So after you get over the first ego hit, which is like, oh, there's another John Boy. Well, yeah, it's been 50 years. Wake up. Right after you scratch that itch, all you're thinking is how wonderful that something that I did, the role that I did, could be handed down to another actor 50 years later. It's a beautiful thing. And Logan never needed any help from me. But I like the association, and I like being in touch with him and being connected to him.
Because we're an awards website, I have to go back to your Emmy win, which is one of my favorites, because you had a story about wrecking your car when you won the Emmy. Can you tell that story?
Well, look, I was okay. So I was a born and raised New York theater brat, right? I didn't drive. I had a car. I hated driver ed in Manhattan. I mean, who wouldn't, right? So forget it. Then I moved to California.
Imagine driver's ed in Manhattan.
Exactly. Well, it's a good thing that I didn't get my license here. That's all I can say based on my driving. But I moved to LA to do the series. I thought, okay, I got to get a license. I'm going to have to drive. Fortunately, there were lots of Teamsters on the set to give me lessons. Actually, Teamsters took me to the DMV to get my test. That was so great. So I got my license, but I was a very new driver. I mean, I had only literally been driving for a few months by the time when we started. And then, it wasn't, look, I felt like I was 21 years old. I felt like I had wrecked my car. It was just a fender bender. Okay. But having the mind of an actor, of course, things have to be more dramatic. So, I thought, well, and the reason it happened was that I was driving from work back to where I was staying to get dressed for the Emmys. And I thought, my God, because it never occurred to me that I would win this. I mean, the last thing in the world that occurred to me that I would win this. I thought, well, wait a minute, you might. And if you do, what are you going to say? You haven't thought of anything to say. You better think about what red light, bang, So that's what it was, trying to think of an acceptance speech. I hit the car in front of me. My insurance guy said that it was the first claim he'd ever seen filed on national TV. But so I never did think of what to say, because I had this thing happen. I got home, I had to get in the bag, get the car, go to the Emmys, win the award, get up on stage and go, I had a car accident.
Do you remember?
I was able to thank my two families.
Do you remember what episode you submitted for that first Emmys?
Yeah, I do. I submitted The Love Story, which was the episode with Sean Barbara Allen about John Boy's first real love.
I was thinking about this morning, is that there are so many aspects of the Waltons that are so contemporary, and you can even go back to some of those episodes 50 years ago, and the messages are, I'm thinking in particular of the book burning episode, especially in the context of so many places wanting to ban books now.
Yep. Oh, I mean, if the Waltons were a contemporary story right now, you would do that book burning story, that book banning story. Absolutely, you would do it. There are many things. There's a story about a Jewish family that's escaped to Germany, that are, immigrants that have come to the community that not only are different, but that represent an entirely different set of customs and history and all that, and who are looked on many as, interlopers, or, there's that story. And that would be a story we would tell, that we would absolutely tell today. A story about literacy is a story that
I was just thinking of the scholar episode.
Yeah, exactly. So there are these. That's what I mean when I say that these issues and these stories they're perennial. They're evergreen. Some of them are alarmingly topical now. I wish they weren't, but they are.
Did what kind of conversations did you have with Sam Haskell, who was really kind of the driving force behind this in terms of bringing it back? Did he reach out to you in terms of like getting your input or anything like that?
Sam did reach out to. Sam Haskell has been the presiding genius and guardian angel of this iteration of the Waltons. His commitment to it and his belief in the value of that material is so touching to me and so important. I mean, none of us would be doing this if Sam hadn't seen that now is the time for more Waltons. And of course we spoke about it when he reached out to me and invited me. First of all, I was thrilled by the invitation after I got over my ego thing about once I got the petty stuff out of the way, I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy to have been invited to still remain a part of this family that I have never felt I left. So very important to me. And yes, I had, when I read the script and, he invited comments and all that. I mean, he has his own point of view about how he wants the show to go, which I completely respect, but it wouldn't make much sense to have me involved and not get some kind of opinion, as much as it's worth, about what I feel, about the material. Unfortunately, I was very supportive of it. I just said, but the one thing I remember saying always was, make sure that you're not trying to teach, because we never tried to teach. We just tried to tell stories of people and relationships. That it was never, that the show should never be didactic or moralistic, or that it should reveal its teaching moments simply through compassion and the relationships between people, and that the audience decide for themselves.
I wonder, having such a landmark role on television, and yet you've managed, whereas many actors, sometimes get typecast, you've managed to kind of parlay that into a lot of really great stuff, whether it's, The Americans, or your, frankly, terrifying turn on Ozark this season.
Not Grandpa Walton.
Not Grandpa Walton. No. And also your theater work. You're on tour with To Kill a Mockingbird and Shakespeare and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think the key has been to you kind of getting out of that kind of typecast box?
Well, the first thing about it was, it wasn't my first barbecue. I was making movies before I did the Waltons. I wasn't sure I wanted to do a series, because I was starting to make movies and they were, and enjoying it and doing well at it. And, I had my work in the theater, and I had always worked in, doing television. It was like, do I really want to take myself out of the running for a period of time? And then, of course, I read the scripts that came in, and they were so beautiful. I thought, well, how could you possibly not do this? I mean, in the infinite wisdom of a 21-year-old, right? So I knew I was an actor before, and I knew that I had done other stuff before, and I knew I'd do it again. And you just have persistence, and you have to understand that when you decide to make the turn, you can't expect everybody to make the turn with you, and that it's going to take time, and you're going to have to balance the scales, and you're going to have to turn down some parts that people just offer you because they're like what you played yesterday, and you're going to have to look for things that are different. The theater has always been a great consolation, because the repertoire and the ability to play many, many different things and types of roles is always there for us. And so it was always helpful, but I managed to play, a lot of different things. I just got lucky, and my commitment to the theater and to the classics and to doing new plays has never waned, and that's been a wonderful thing for me. And I just been lucky, I was lucky. I just kept at it, and I felt like I could do it. And it's a long game. You got to play the long game. You got to just stay in it and think of it as work, just as work. actor for hire.
Well, and it goes back to what you were talking about, is that John Boy is being taken over by a different actor, but that's kind of what even theater is, particularly.
Totally what theater is. If I worried about the people who had played Hamlet before me, do you think I ever would have walked out on stage in that role? Of course not. The essence of repertoire is that if a role is great enough and good enough to be played by multiple actors, it should be, because that offers different perspectives on the material and a different point of view, a different interpretation, a different way of thinking about the material. And we join hands in this continuity of performance, and it's a very beautiful thing. It's the great family of players, and we're all connected to one another.
Do you have a favorite? I'm a high school teacher in my normal 9-to-5 job, and so as an English teacher, Shakespeare is something that comes to me, constantly. I'm wondering, you've played a lot of Shakespeare. I'm wondering if you have a favorite. Do you have a favorite role?
Well, I've been fortunate. I've played a lot of the big goodies, so I have a lot of favorites. It's very hard to say whether you like Richard II more than Iago, or whether you like Hamlet more than Richard III, or whether you like. It's like, whoa, it's a golden problem to have to pick a favorite. I would say my favorite will be the one that I'll try to do next, which would be, because Shakespeare is so all consuming when you play one of these roles, when you enter the play and you enter the language, which is such a big part of it, and you confront the issues and the questions that the playwright poses for you. It's a completely immersive experience, Shakespeare, and I miss it. I miss it, and I'm looking forward to doing the next one. So I guess the next big ones would be, Prospero or Lear or whatever. But each one adds something. I have to say, when I was invited to play Iago at the Globe a few years back, I knew it was one of the greatest roles Shakespeare had written, but I really didn't know how much fun it was going to be. It's such a wonderful experience. It's such a great role to play. And because a lot of it is in prose, it's a more complicated thing than a lot of the plays in verse, the roles in verse to learn. So, because Shakespeare's prose is more difficult than his verse, in my opinion. But yes, I love, that was the most recent, so that's my favorite.
Well, Richard, it was really just a delight to talk to you.
Thank you.
And we can't wait for the new Waltons this coming Thanksgiving. Very excited for that. What can you tell me, if anything?
Well, I can tell you that the family is together, and I can tell you that a new member of the family is going to show up, and that the spirit of giving thanks in the story is matched by the spirit of giving, and that we understand that Thanksgiving is made of two words, thanks and giving, and that the family comes to a beautiful place of giving is probably the most heartwarming and beautiful thing about it.
I can't wait. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders throughout the season. Richard Thomas, a real honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure to speak with you. I enjoyed it very much.